everyone, I'm Debbie Bolla. I'm the executive editor of HRO Today magazine, if we haven't met. Hello. And earlier this year, I had the opportunity to interview some of the CHROs who were on yesterday's panel, who you probably saw. And of course, I wanted to pick their brains about talent strategy, knowing how critical it is to organizations today. And from speaking to all of them, a phrase stuck out: leading the leaders. Each said how very important it was for their organizations to have a strong leadership. So when we were planning the conference, we couldn't think of a better way to wrap up the forum than going straight to the top. So on stage with me is an illustrious group of leaders to have an engaging discussion on a few topics that we feel are very important to HR and the workforce. So why don't we begin with everyone introducing themselves, starting with John. Just say your name and your company and a little bit about your leadership style.
So my name is John Wilson. I'm the CEO of Wilson HCG. I think our company's strategy always is to hire the best people internally and develop and cultivate them to take us to the next level.
I'm Sue Marks, CEO of Pinstripe and Ochre House, and early in my career, and really actually continuing, people would say, how can you afford to pay X amount for whatever kind of skill set they were looking for? And my approach was always, I'd rather hire fewer, better people. It's like, how can you not afford to pay for the best talent?
Great.
My name is Paul Harty. I'm the president of Seven Step RPO. Our overall methodology is very much team-based, methodical, and strategic.
Hi, I'm Zaino, president of MBO Partners. And we're all about entrepreneurs, and our culture is very entrepreneurial, of course.
Great. So we have a set of questions, and I'll direct them to some of our panelists. But feel free to jump in if a point gets you going. So let's dive in. Since 2008, all we've been talking about is the economy, right? It stinks. But now it's actually looking better. Last week, I read the unemployment rate was at 6.2%, and the U.S. added 300,000 jobs in the month of April. So that means some consumer confidence is up. So John, why don't you start by saying, do you agree with this? Do you think the economy is better? And what kind of impact does consumer confidence have on business and the workforce?
Yeah, I think we see it in our industry as when organizations are obviously adding jobs, but the indicators for us go down to specific job families. So we see with salespeople in a bad economy, they continue to be hired, continue to push. And now we see the competition of the people that are good at sales, how much a company is willing to do to get them. So the competition heats up, it gets much more intense. And so we see a few things such as that go within our accounts and our clients that are good indicators for us. Very rarely are we hearing clients talking about how do we save money right now. It is about how do we get better. And for me, that is just that statement is the big indicator of they want their companies to be better, not necessarily cut cost.
Now, is that a bit of a relief for you from your standpoint?
It's exactly what we want everybody to think, because my theory is that if you get better, you will in turn become more efficient. Talent acquisition will be not be as cost prohibitive. You will see the talent that walks in your door be better, and therefore you are going to have higher revenue. You're going to have better efficiencies and overall better talent.
Now, Jean, you do a lot with contract labor contingent. So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, you mentioned the economy is absolutely getting better, but I'd be careful about looking at that unemployment rate, because a lot of people have exited the workforce, which is, kind of makes the unemployment rate look lower, but there's actually less people engaged in the workforce traditionally as employees than there has ever been in history. And the 300,000 jobs you mentioned is good. Certainly that's an indicator, and we see a lot more activity. But I think this recovery is very different. I think it's structural, and I think it's not a typical recovery of employment. I think companies are very hesitant to want to rebuild. I think they're much more interested in figuring out how do we innovate, how do we change, and how do we be more flexible. And I think that is a different type of structural recovery than has been in the past.
Yeah, I mean, certainly I think a lot of organizations have entered a new norm of how they conduct business.
Absolutely, yeah. I think I absolutely believe that companies are very hesitant to want to rebuild a heavy structure. I think there's a lot of fear about startups in your backyard. I think, and I think the individuals that are out there are also feeling that there's a lot of opportunity. You know, everybody wants to be the next WhatsApp or whatever, and you know, years ago the big job used to be go to Wall Street and get out and be in the finance business. I think now it's a matter of, gee, how do I go start up something?
Right.
Debbie, there's a couple of other things. I'd urge people not just to look at that unemployment rate, and yes, it's going down, but to look at the JOLTS, J-O-L-T-S index. And what we're finding with that, and you probably look at that as well, is that people leave jobs to find new jobs when their confidence gets better.
That makes
and
sense.
while we haven't reached, to your point, the highs of people leaving existing jobs to find new jobs, that number is starting to go in the right direction as well. So
Right.
that's a different metric to look at rather than just the unemployment rate.
Yeah, that's a great point. A generation that was certainly affected by the workforce or getting into the workforce were millennials. Just as the economic downfall happened, a lot of them were graduating college and trying to find their first jobs. So there's been a lot of talk about millennials. And I know, John, you actually wrote an article for the magazine actually encouraging people to hire millennials. I think you called them the mobile generation. So I want to get some more of your thoughts about them, if they're really that different, and if they do need a different approach to get them interested in your organization.
Yeah, for us, it was, we looked at this generation that we've all heard all of these negative things about them. But what they've experienced in their lifetimes coming into the workforce is much different than most of us in the room. They were in school in 9/11. They saw their parents potentially lose their jobs. They get out of school or in school and see the economy completely crash. So why we classify them, or you read these articles about them not working hard or understanding what it means, I would challenge people to find a previous generation that has seen that kind of financial turmoil in their lives.
That's a great point.
So as we look at bringing them into our company and letting them grow, engagement is number one. Because they've seen such huge declines and challenges economically, they need to have a feeling of safety and investment in an organization. And really that is our goal in the way we manage and collaborate with the millennials.
Great. And Paul, what are some of your thoughts?
So we have the advantage of being in Boston, where we're surrounded by 55 colleges and universities. So, you know, for years and years, we've had a real strong pulse on the, you know, college graduates and people entering the workforce and so on. And we've had a lot of internship programs that have been very, very successful. This group isn't dissimilar in that they look for opportunities. They need, as John mentioned, engagement. They need set goals, and they need a clear path. I'm not sure that that's really different than any other generation. You know, when I got hired, I wanted all of those things. So the people that we're managing now, if you can give them the right kinds of goals, if you can open up the conversation about what career is going to mean to them, and give them some meaning behind what they're doing, we find that there's a lot more stickiness there with that group.
Right.
They're, as much as they are enabled to have a voice, you know, with the different social media tools and, you know, all these kinds of things that can sometimes be a little bit scary and maybe dangerous, you know.
Yeah.
They're also very loyal when they're committed to a cause or a mission. So if you want to, you know, hire some recruiters to fill some jobs, and that makes sense, and, you know, you need to do that. But if you can give them a little bit more meaning to that and spend a little more time talking about the why that you're doing the things that you're doing, and be very, very clear with them. I don't think I was, in my early days, I guess, you know, needed maybe as much hands-on kind of,
Sure.
I think micromanagement is a word that, you know, is kind of an interesting word. It really is just active management with this group of people. You know, you really need to be thinking about, again, how often you communicate with them. You really set the right kinds of goals and really be communicating on a regular basis, and then enable them. You know, it's tough. You know, they've got, you know, their cell phone on the desk, and they're, you know, they're texting while they're doing work, and they got, you know, all these different kinds of things going. For a lot of managers that maybe, you know,
used to that.
aren't used to that, it's hard to see, and you wonder, well, are they being efficient and so on. You've got to really be able to be open and encouraging for those kinds of tools, and naturally manage them to some productivity goals that meet everybody's needs.
Right. And you both brought up the word engagement, right? I mean, there was that Gallup report last year, 70% of the workforce, how many times have we heard it, is disengaged. But it's so crucial. Productivity rates, everything's affected by engagement. So Sue, share some secrets, getting those employees engaged, encouraged, productive.
Well, here's another scary number that I read in a blog this morning. Only 18% of people think that they have a good manager. So if we think about our organizations as they grow, we've got this lower, middle, and middle level of managers. And so often we very excitedly promote them from an individual contributor into a manager, and we don't really train them how to be a manager.
Right.
I mean, would we ever put anybody in front of a computer or a machine or in a factory without training them? So I actually think that's a scarier number. I don't buy that Generation X, the millennials, and even those younger aren't every bit as smart, committed, great, passionate workers as any other generation. I think each generation has their own foundational point of view, and it's never been harder to be an HR leader, and it's never been harder to be a leader because we have 3 or 4, or I don't know, maybe we're going on our 5th generation
Right, yeah.
in the workforce, and we have to pay the right kind of attention to each and every one of them. And I think we owe all of our employees a little bit around the context. I mean, if we're aligned and they know where we're going and about how we're going to get there, that's really it's not that difficult for most leaders and managers to do. So I just don't buy that they're so hard to manage. They're just different.
Yeah.
I agree, and I would actually add to that, you know, going back to engagement and sort of that Gallup poll, I often wonder about, you know, those kinds of studies.
Of
you know,
course.
they seem a little depressing, I think, in some ways, but you know, you just wonder naturally what that, who responded to that, and maybe where their companies are at the time that they answered that.
Sure.
Right. So you know, all companies go through ups and downs, and there's, you know, different times when, you know, employees are really highly engaged and highly motivated, and sometimes when they're a little bit less so. You know, and it might just be because, you know, they've seen 3 quarters of, you know, non-hiring, or, you know, a little bit of, you know, travel freezing, or, you know, whatever it might be. So, you know, to that point, the idea of where we're going and, you know, what kind of a cycle we're in right now, and really communicating with your employees as to, you know, what kind of a cycle we're going through right now, and how this is going to help you be a better business person moving forward, and, you know, what do you see what happens on the other end, you know, gets people a lot more engaged.
Sure. Gene, did you have
Yeah, you know, the study's kind of interesting. I think that the 70% disengagement is really about people being stressed out. I think there's been an increased amount of productivity pushed, expectations pushed on employees. I think it's been a factor of the economy. I think people feel stuck, that they can't do what they want to do. And I think ultimately with the millennials, and actually with anybody, I think people want to start doing what it is that they really like to do. And they're kind of stuck in a rat race, and it's kind of depressing when you really think about it. But I think what's the good news is that certainly with the economy coming back, and with more options out there, and the tools that we just kind of saw, you know, these new startups bringing to the table here, I think people are going to start finding out how to best match what it is that they want to do with the type of work they want to do, and hopefully there'll be more flexibility within an organization, as well as within within anywhere, for people to do what it is that they want to do, because I think that's the key. And I think millennials have really put an exclamation mark on that, in that millennials have said, it's not as much about the money, it's about what I do.
Right.
And I think, unfortunately, many of the older than millennials, whatever you want to call them, they kind of got stuck in, I got to do this because I need to make money, and I have a life to live, and I have, and they feel stuck, and I think that's part of the problem.
So they might make different work choices.
Yeah, or they're kind of, you know, they're in it and they can't get out of it, and they get
Debbie,
not happy.
I think it's interesting because we have a joke that no one's ever grown up to say, I want to be a recruiter. That's never been said in the history of a high school.
Right.
And so it's more about the environment you create in the organization that lets them do what they want to do, as you mentioned, and playing off the strengths of the generation and the individual. Putting brand ambassadors, use their obsession of social media to your advantage, and they enjoy it, and it can make an impact in their happiness.
Yeah, absolutely. Organizations still are challenged to find highly skilled positions. Paul, have you seen this in your own organization when hiring? And are there any advice for overcoming it?
So I think one thing that we've seen in our own organization and with our clients is to make sure that we're really setting the right kinds of expectations with the hiring managers. There are great people out in the marketplace. As Sue mentioned, there's a lot more people now with the confidence in the marketplace that are now willing to look, right? So you got more people that are starting to feel confident that they leave their job, they'll get another good one, and a little bit easier, a lot more movement. John and I were talking in the hallway about the next 24 months is going to be really, really interesting with talent and how it moves around. And one thing that I think that we pay a lot of attention to is training the hiring manager on how do you find the right kind of talent, meaning, the days of, I need 5 years of experience and, this particular bullet point and that particular bullet point, and I won't look for anybody else that doesn't have that, and if they went to Michigan State, I don't like them because I went to Michigan, It just doesn't work. Mm-hmm. The hiring manager training is becoming, in our own organization, and what we're delivering to many of our customers is a real key advantage to how we go ahead and attract this kind of a talent, right? Because you want to be able to, open your eyes a little bit further around potential rather than the exact skill that you need today. And that's a big challenge for a lot of bigger companies, and they're opening up volumes and volumes of jobs. And we have a lot of hiring managers, some internal, less so, but some mostly with our customers where they want to see 8 or 10 or 12 or 15 people, and they're looking for that exact fit. And you really wonder, geez, how long can you actually wait to get some of these kinds of people, and how important is this job actually if you can have it open for 6 months?
So they're not willing to take that risk.
So they're not, maybe not as willing to make a mistake on hiring.
Right.
And so, again, I think that conversation, that training, that consultative approach to hiring managers and how they should be looking at talent as not just solving my problem today, but how I can build a better organization moving forward, is really where you want to focus everyone.
Right. So you might have to change your mindset a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Sue, do you have any comments? On advice on getting those hard to fill?
Some large percentage of the recruiting we do is preventable because we have turnover. And we have turnover for reasons that actually are avoidable. And so you started addressing that. So I don't know what the number is, whether it's 20% or whether it's half of it. It depends on your organization. But I think paying attention to the engagement of your employees, the design of the work, how you train your managers to be managers, John, the things that you talked about, playing to people's strengths, all of those things are really key. And then it's about getting the talent you actually have to recruit. It's getting your unfair share of it, not just your fair share, but your unfair share of it. And that takes paying real attention to our own employment value propositions. And and I'm not sure that we do as good of a job. I know we don't do as good of a job as we could at our company. I think that's one of those things you always have to be paying attention to, the messaging.
Sure. I want to switch gears a little bit to talk about the ACA, the Affordable Care Act. And we've heard a lot from some of the national press that because the ACA will, provide benefits to the workforce, it might switch those full-time employees to more of a contingent labor market. Gene, I wanted to hear some of your feedback on that.
Well, you hear about the Affordable Care Act will release what's called job lock, right? Job lock, again, is people stuck. And the Affordable Care Act is one less lock for someone to be locked up on, right? I personally don't think it's going to create a change of decision as to whether to hire someone or not. I just think it's another responsibility that employers are taking on, and they're going to take it on anyway. They've been taking it on. I do think, however, it's going to increase the level of attention that companies need to pay to how this law works, because it's extremely complicated.
Yes.
And it's going to require a lot of clarification. Still, I believe it will take a decade of case law before people really know how to apply it, if it remains. And but it certainly is important now as to whether you hire an employee or a staffing employee or a contractor, because that could actually impact in a great way the penalties that are involved with the Affordable Care Act. So I don't think it's going to have a major impact in terms of whether you hire an employee or not. I just think it's going to just create another burden for employers.
Yes. John?
I agree with Jean. I think that the impact in day-to-day is not significant that we see. In order to make employees feel good, we've seen a lot of organizations that are focusing on the benefits outside of just healthcare to make sure that they're promoting that package and pushing those pieces. But to date, haven't seen any. The amount of, I think, concern that the media portrayed that all the companies were going to have,
Right.
To date, that's not been the case in my experience.
It's not really gone anywhere, right? Exactly. Okay, I just have one last question. At the conference, we have a lot of healthcare HR executives, and I know some of your companies provide services to the healthcare industry. So what can we learn about recruitment and talent management for healthcare and non-healthcare clients?
Well, we look at just nurses. We've been hearing this for 5-6 years, if not longer, the shortage of nurses that are available, or how do you get them, how do you retain them, and will they go somewhere else for another $1 if the hospital down the street is doing that? And a lot of things that we've talked about here today about employee engagement, really, as Sue had mentioned, understanding your workforce and where that turnover comes from, that's been very standard in corporate America for a long time. And then you look at healthcare, specifically in the hospitals, it is not operated that way in many cases. It is about, is this person going to show up for their shift, and then this shift, and this shift, and this shift? And you taking that philosophy that we've all seen in corporate America and applying it, I think will really help, at least in the hospital piece of it, and with the nurses that seem to be the biggest concern, will help that problem.
Sue?
Well, healthcare organizations have a perfect burning platform right now as they move from getting paid on volume to getting paid on value. And their HCAP scores, so the patient satisfaction scores, will have an impact on how they get reimbursed. They won't get reimbursed for mistakes in the same surgery and readmissions and things like that. And the old ways will not get them from here to there. So they need to get out of their own way, and this is kind of tough talk for the healthcare providers in the room. But what we find, our most successful clients take the best practices from other commercial businesses, other industries that have gone through these tumultuous times and evolution and revolutions, actually, and then take those best practices and make them work within their particular organization. So I think it's really actually taking that leap of faith,
Right.
And stepping into the future and getting on with it.
Yeah, change can be tough.
I wish I could be a little more controversial and come up with some kind of argument, but these are all great points. Sorry, I try to spice it up a little bit. Our healthcare clients, I think, demonstrate their, I would say, maybe it's frustration or uncertainty around how things are changing so rapidly by just their constant changing of forecasts. And the way that the volumes go up and down in very large numbers. So for those firms that we work with who are really trying to manage what this is all going to mean to them and how they forecast better, we're really working a lot on, again, some of the things that we do with other private customers, as Sue mentioned, working on talent pipelining and talent pooling and things of that nature, so that we're already in the ready when all of a sudden, when they thought they were going to hire 400 people one month and it goes to 700 or 800, we've got, people moving in, we've got backup, because what we find is that when it comes, it's urgent. And
They want it done now.
they all, and a lot of it is regulated. They're opening up, care in a certain new, county or state, and they have to meet certain, regulations and timelines in order to get that to happen, whether it's in enrollment periods or whatever.
Sure.
So the urgency to get talent in, and some of the crazy volumes that go up and down, is kind of our focus with them on really trying to help them manage through all those peaks and valleys.
Yeah, it's a stressful time.
It is.
Well, they're so advanced in their clinical and diagnostic areas, and they are such laggards in terms of best practices around support functions,
Yeah.
finance, HR. It's,
Sure.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So we do have a few minutes. If anyone has a question for one of our panelists, feel free to ask. Come on. There's got to be a couple out there. Oh, Elliot.
Oh, Elliot, you don't count.
I just want to know why John Wilson didn't assume that I wanted to be a recruiter in high school. Now, one of the big issues that is facing the market is actually a risk and compliance issue from the legal side. It has to do with worker classifications. Okay, so I know, for example, the MBO's got some stuff about it, but as we look at both the increasing component of the market that is permanent and the portion that is contingent, and when you're helping find folks for clients across the broad array of different job classifications, what are you doing what are the various firms doing to help address this worker classification issue? Because there's emerging litigation all over the place about some of these issues.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jimmy.
So it's a whole broad area of expertise, and most companies are outsourcing it because, we've seen organizations try to take it into their legal department, and it's just overwhelming. There's too much transaction activity, and actually, it's even from a legal perspective, it's better to have some of these things outside your organization than within your organization. Plus, give it to people that have an area of expertise. Quite honestly, all of the different areas of compliance or worker classification, they are different based on the type of industry and even the type of worker. But for the most part, you could build programs that could be targeted at the type of people you want to engage, and do come up with a very clean and compliant way of bringing them on board. But the most important thing I could suggest is the biggest risk you have is people that are bringing on non-employers or contractors that are not happy. And if you treat them badly, or you put them through a process that's totally ridiculous for them, like there's a lot of processes that I see companies sending these people through that are designed for a staffing vendor or someone else, and charge them the MSP fee and VMS fee, and here you have a one-person contractor who can't make it up on volume because they have a limited number of opportunities. And it all can be figured out, but the biggest risk is if you have programs in place that are making these people upset. There are so many whistleblowing concepts out there. Everybody has a friend who is an attorney. The Department of Labor makes it easy to raise your hand and say, hey, I should be doing this, or the IRS. You have to treat these people and like they need to be treated, and that's probably the biggest impact of designing a program, is to have something that works with the population you're bringing on board. That's what we see.
Anyone else? No? Oh.
So I just had a personal leadership question in terms of being role models. We always look at our leaders for not what they say, but what they do. Maybe give an example of how there's a practice you have, something you do that reflects the culture of the company or your leadership style.
Sure. I think one thing that is so easy for me to do that our employees absolutely love is I send, on Friday, I'll send an email just about my week. And not just professionally, but personally, what was going on, try to include pictures. I get lucky enough to get to travel all the time and give them an insight into my day and my week. I think that is a huge piece of engagement within our organization. And then overall, just making sure, because we can be transparent and we can preach be transparent through the organization. And the study you had mentioned, Sue, the mid-level managers, and that's not always the case. And so making transparency a requirement, if that's the culture of your organization.
We had an employee committee that put together our values, and we start each, and every company has values, and they're all on the website and whatever. But we have something called Values in Motion that I thought was kind of cheesy when it started out. We would start a meeting, and it's individuals reflecting on something that their peers did that reflected our values, and that's really become quite important in the organization, and it's peer recognition, which has been great.
And there's been some good adoption of that?
Very, very good adoption. We have Yammer throughout the organization, so we have a Lego program, and it's employee recognition around 5 different colors for the different 5 different values.
I remember that from last year.
Yeah, and they can get virtual Legos on Yammer, or they can actually go get real Legos.
Cool.
So, yeah.
Cool idea.
We work in our delivery center in Bolla. We have a corporate office in one part of Boston, and then we have the delivery center in downtown, and that's where my office is. And so, the thing, sort of leading by example is, I'm in it with them, every day. So I, share the kitchen, and we all work together in our delivery center with a very open line of communication. Similar to John's emails, we do a town hall meeting about every 2 weeks, no longer than a month, where it's the entire staff. We video conference in with our people in Denver, and I do very similar kinds of things, give them updates on where we're at with the sales pipeline, what's happening with some of our current customers. We give a lot of kudos to certain people who have meted or exceeded their goals. Some real sort of interesting call-outs. We also have a lot of energy around our 7-Step Cares program, which is a lot of the charitable work that we do. I had 15 volunteers on Saturday at a big mitochondrial disease fundraiser, and they get great reviews from the charity organizations on how great our volunteers are because they're so committed to what they're doing, and it makes things a lot more manageable, and it makes work a lot more fun. So
they feel connected.
Yeah. Yep,
right.
absolutely.
Anyone else before we wrap up? Okay, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank everyone on our panel.
Nice to see you.